Hey, it's John and Mike, Brew-Dudes.com. Who invited this guy?
Who invited this guy?
So, I don't know if you tuned into our last video from last week, but we were drinking Smash beer and I talked about how I brewed on the new Brewzilla, the Gen 4. And then Mike had a little secret. He talked to me around Christmas and he said, oh, good. You know what? I've been brewing most of my beer the last few months.
My last 7 beers have been done on a Brewzilla, secretly. I hadn't told anybody. So.
He's like, oh, good. I'm glad you have one because I've been brewing on this thing. I'm like, oh, cool. Thanks for telling me. Anyway, we're here to talk about the pros, cons, our experience with the Brewzilla.
The Brewzilla.
And since we just wanted to show this, you want to take this guy out off the desk? He's taking up a lot of space. So you've done 7 batches on it.
Yeah,
I've only done the one.
Okay.
I can't wait to brew more on it. Yeah. But what's your take, your fast take? And let's start with all the positive things that you've experienced.
Yeah,
all
okay.
Positives.
So for me, it's been it's been at least 7 batches. I absolutely love the. It works like flawlessly. The dialable control on the control panel for temperature is tremendous. In fact, when I'm brewing with propane, which I'll probably still use my propane system, but and we'll get into that later. But the fact that you can just say, I want to be at 152, and it just goes to 152, heating up water, getting it ready to mash. Forget even brewing. You have water in there and you say, you put in your strike temperature, I leave, then I go away, right? And yeah. I know how long it's going to take for it to come up to temperature, but I don't have to sit there and babysit it, where with the propane system, I could hit temperature and heat beyond it, and yes. Now, which then does what? For these 2 guys, I'll just speak for myself, adds time to the brew day. So the first big pro right off the bat is I've noticed from the prep work, like heating water, it just saves a lot of time. The other feature too is, and I've only used this feature 1 time, but I plan to make more use of it, is you can set a timer on that thing for say 15 hours. And so like when you leave for work in the morning, you can have the water in there already, set it for 13 hours, 12 hours from now, and if your grain is already crushed, you come home, you can put the grain in there, stir it in, start your mash, and then go in the house and like not have to worry about temp going up or down or whatever, and just have it do its thing. So it's a great wort producing machine from that standpoint, right? Whereas it's just less babysitting. So I can prep hops, I can prep a fermenter, I can make dinner for the family, I can do what I need to do, I can watch a football game and not worry about the propane just overheating or underheating. Sure. I think that's, for me, first, the big pro is that aspect of it, is the ease of it. I've seen an efficiency bump versus what my propane system, in terms of, now the thing with that too is I've been using about 1 pound. I watched one of the more beer videos on. I have the Gen 3. Actually putting a pound of rice hulls in there, which is mind blowing. A whole pound. I don't think I used a whole pound when I used my big system. But so you get better flow through with the pump. The pump has been flawless. There's no priming because it's at the bottom anyway. So that's been flawless. It's another big pro. That's been going great. The recirculation's been going great. Rice hulls in there. So I'm pushing like, on some days 85, 87% efficiency, wow. Whereas my old system I was maybe doing about 70% efficiency. And this is mash efficiency, not brew house efficiency. So I love that aspect of it. I find that to be super convenient, like a really well running machine from that standpoint. I wasn't sure how I would feel about the lift out, but it's super easy. The basket lifts out, you just twist it a little bit, the feet catch, it's great. I've seen videos of other systems where you've got these little clips you got to put in. That just seemed to be, so definitely, it's just all around easy to work with. I have the recirculating for during the boil. You got one of these in your system? Yep, so that works great. The other thing I really like is I have never worked with cam lock fittings. So the cam lock fittings, I'm actually getting really pretty used to the cam lock fittings. That's pretty great. So I've really enjoyed that aspect of it too. So the pieces, the mash recirculating arm thing, I have it here. I might as well show it because I brought it in. You know, this piece, you know, attaches to the top, same as this, and then this goes in, and this is for recirculating your mash. So I like that. So it works great. I mean, I think those are the big things for me so far that have been absolutely phenomenal about it. How about you on your first run?
Yeah, I think it was just the the ability to set the temp and feel like, okay, there's not going to be. I mean, I was also using it. You know, the capacity for it, you know, is 7-8 gallons or something like that, right? And I was using it for 2, so I knew that there wasn't going to be a boil over. That whole idea of not having to babysit, and I know we're talking like. Hey, we're just coming on to like the thing that's been around for 10 plus years now. It's okay, we got there. Yeah. I remember we would do the live stream, people would be like, hey, that's really great, you're old school in it. Like, they're like, that's our school? Yeah. But it's, you know, I think the price tag has been prohibitive. Yeah. Especially if someone has the equipment. Do you want to sink another US dollars, we're talking about here, $600, $700, $800 for these brewed?
You know, I bought mine back in late October, November because the Gen 4 was coming out, and More Beer specifically had a pretty deep discounts on Gen 3s because they're trying to unload them. Sure. So this is 110 volt Gen 3, so that's why I bought it, because it was cheap. I figured, let me see if I'm even gonna like this per se. So, and you know, so that's what got me over the hump for giving it a go. Yep.
I mean, I haven't set up the app on my phone, but I will.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The Gen 3 doesn't do that.
Okay. So, sorry. I'm talking about.
So I'm old school.
New school. I'm the new school. Yeah. So I think that. I mean, we've talked about this. There is the 110 volt, and then there's the 220 volt. And do we feel like the 110 volt gives enough power to do a full rolling boil? Because that's one thing I did notice, you know, based on when I was doing a 1 gallon batch with a propane burner, I'd get they always say, get a vigorous boil. And I was getting that vigorous boil for sure under a flame. Do we feel like there's enough power to get that volume to boil? So
these are like probably the cons of a 110. Okay, the 220 I'm sure is probably a little bit different, but so what I've been doing is 3 gallon batches, right? And I bought it specifically for that reason. I cannot imagine waiting around for this thing to come to like a 6 gallon boil to boil down. I have noticed that even so, at the end of my mash, I'm at about between 3.5 4 gallons, and it took me a while to realize it was taking more than 60 minutes to boil down to my target 3 gallons, because it is a weak boil. Yeah. Even at not a full size batch, like a 3 gallon batch, 1 gallon batch, it's just not a super strong boil. And so just evaporation from that standpoint has been a little bit something to get used to, and a little bit tiresome, because it takes a long time. It just takes a long time to sort of get going. You know, being at 110, that's just the reality. And so if I was going to buy one of these systems, everybody should really realize that like the 110 is underpowered. Now, these things were originally invented and made in countries that their normal power is 220, 240, right? And so here in the US, we're 110, where like things like maybe your dryer or an electric stove, those things are on 220. So if you have access and you want to brew in your laundry room or something, then that's fine. But I would avoid trying to, people who have this and do 110, good for you. But for me personally, coming off of propane, I just would not, I cannot imagine trying to do a 6 gallon boil in 60 minutes with one of these systems. I just can't imagine it. It just take forever. One way I've gotten around it is 2 things. When I had it up here, I wrapped it in Reflectix to try to hold some of that heat in, especially brewing this time of year for us. It's much cooler. In my garage, it's between 30 and 40 degrees. So that has sort of accelerated things a little bit because it's holding in some heat. You can buy a neoprene jacket. Does yours have a neoprene jacket?
I have to buy that separately, yep.
I haven't decided whether I really want to go that route or if the Reflectix is doing fine. The other thing I've noticed too, which is almost heresy, is I put the lid on it, and but I leave it ajar, you know. So you know, if your lid goes on the top like this, you can set it up like that, so there's still plenty of vapor coming out of it, but it holds enough heat in that the boil is more aggressive. But because you're holding more of that heat in, the vapor isn't escaping as quickly, so evaporation still is a little bit hampered. But I mean, there is a big hole in the top of the lid, and when it's like this, there's plenty of it's coming out of there. So that has improved that situation. It's my workaround for that so far is to do that, just to get it going. I mean, I have boiled over in the thing like twice.
Okay.
Only because, you know, I was getting a little bit too comfortable with not having to babysit it. So I say at the end of the mash, I hit go and like put it on to boil, high heat, and I walk away thinking, but it's got to, you know, you look at it and say, okay, it's at 160. You might come back, oh, it's at 175. You come back, but then you just get a little bit carried away with washing the dishes or doing this or just, you know, maybe the game goes in overtime. And you're like, and then and all of a sudden you go out there and it's like foam, and so. I definitely leave the lid on when I'm trying to get it to boil, so it comes to boil faster. So, yeah, the strength of a 110 voltage going through the heating element, it's just not all that strong.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that at 1 gallon you noted the difficulty. So,
well, it's just I know what a vigorous boil looks like, right? And when it did hit temperature, boiling temperature, I looked down and said, okay, you know, there is some activity on the surface of the actual volume there, but I would not consider it vigorous.
Yeah.
So,
so the other weird aspect to it, which has taken some time to get used to, is that, especially with these smaller batches, in the bottom of this thing, there's a false bottom, and then the basket goes in there and it has its own false bottom, right? It takes almost a full gallon of water just to get to the top of the false bottom. In mine, I don't know about yours. Almost a full gallon there. And then it takes another almost 3/4 of a gallon to hit the bottom of the mash basket. Right. So now you're a gallon in, you're 2 gallons in, and you haven't wet any grain yet, right? Like the grain isn't in the water. So it's a little bit weird to sort of, on a smaller batch, like if you were at enough grain for, let's say you had 12, 15 pounds of grain in there for a full 5-gallon batch, and you probably fill the thing up all the way to like 7.5, 8 gallons of water. And you'd have plenty of mash in the water. In that dead space, it's not really dead space, but that void volume that isn't in direct contact with the mash becomes less when you've got that much water in it. But when you're trying to do so what I've been doing is about 5 gallons, so I've only got about 2.5 gallons interacting with the mash, which limits, what does that mean? So that limits how strong a beer you can make, because if you want to add enough grain to, say, get to a 1080 beer in a 3-gallon batch, you probably don't actually have enough water interacting with the grain. It'd be too thick of a mash. Now, what I have noticed, even when I'm stirring it in and it seems like it's really thick, once you actually start recirculating, though, all the water is seeing it. It's just that it's just the amount of water that's in contact with the grain at the time. So it's sort of, like I said, I'm getting great efficiency, and the beers have been absolutely great so far. But you have to really be aware of your recipe math, right? And I'm sorry, but I've been trying to make it work in Beersmith, and screw that. Okay, just screw that software. It's just not that easy. It's just not. I mean, it's easy, but it's not at the same time, because there's a lot of variables involved there. So, I mean, you're talking about 50% of your is void volume. I mean, you can't. So that part's been a little bit tricky, but I've been making it work, and I brew, moderate strength beer, so it hasn't been a problem. You're certainly not going to knock out a 2-gallon imperial stout in this thing. You just wouldn't have enough water in there for that amount of grain. You just wouldn't. So that's another detractor. Just the geometry of how far it sits off the bottom. With the water, so that's been an issue for me.
Interesting. But overall, we're big fans, and certainly we love to brew with all kinds of equipment. That's for sure. And this has been, it's been something that we've wanted to. Just it's been a little bit cost prohibitive, but like Mike has. waited for is a deep discount when they were switching over the versions. And maybe that's when you strike, if that's what you're into, right? Especially in these tough economic times. We'll keep brewing, and we'll have other things to say. I mean, you know what? I want to say that brown ale that you made, the one year of the series, I was like thinking about that thing like during the week. I was like, darn, that was the damn good beer. And I was thinking, like, I wonder it's because of the new Brewzilla. Not saying that the beers you brewed before that, but like that came out spectacular.
I think what a system like this does for you is it eliminates some percentage of the worry or the effort around like temperatures or this or that, right? And so you can focus more on the recipe and the beer itself than some of that mashing process, right? That the hitting those numbers and stuff like that. So I think it's easier to focus then on things like water chemistry and stuff that when the temperature thing takes care of itself, right? That's the best part of it. Brewing an electric, and I've known this even before I had one, just been reluctant to get there, is that dialable control certainly seems to help quite a bit. Now I've got experiments planned. I'm going to play with that like crazy and make some. We'll see what we come up with there.
Yep.
But I bought this because I think it's an excellent way to make wort for like smaller batches, half size, 1 gallon. It's definitely doable. It sort of speeds up the process a little bit. I say my brew day's gotten a little bit faster when I'm not goofing off doing other things because I know I don't have to babysit it.
Right on. So cool. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Appreciate your patience while we got up to the 21st century of home brewing. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel because we do this kind of thing every single week. For John and Mike, brew-dudes.com. Brew on.
Cheers.